Tem um like já? Você mandou um raio. Deve ser a internet, né? Hum, deixa eu ver no. Não, tá. Foi? Vai lá fora e testa o áudio. Uhum. Aqui, yeah. Hum. Hum. Tá, tá, tá. Uh, uh. How's everyone doing? Good morning. Thank you so much again for being here so early. I know, yeah, but it's okay. Next year. Before was like demo review here, right? And like recruiting. Yeah. Nice. Yeah, yeah. Uh, if you want to grab more chair from the other rooms, just steal them from there. But yeah, so thanks for everyone that returned from the past lectures. Yesterday we talked about feature film animation like face appeal. Today's gonna be all about game animation. And if anyone wants to rewatch this, it's gonna be on YouTube. Today I brought the microphone. That's why I'm gonna do it like this, because the audio yesterday was like impossible to hear. But now people are live on YouTube, like hey everyone online, and you can also rewatch it because it's gonna be very technical. I'm gonna get into the very specifics of game animation. Some stuff is gonna be very like hard to get at first. Even for me when I was learning, I had to like redo several times. So that will help that it's gonna be like recorded and you're gonna have like a decent audio. Yes. Animation Flow. I can put the link later on. It's like Anim Flow Academy, the YouTube channel. And if you follow me, I'll just post it like, oh, hey, rewatch the lectures here and stuff. So yeah, let's start up. I'm gonna go again. It's gonna be kind of like yesterday. I'm gonna go over like the lecture portion, and then we're gonna jump into actually like Maya and Unreal. Today we're gonna be talking about Unreal Engine as well, and a little bit of like how I approach this. My personal approach, depending on where you work and how you work, is gonna be different as well. I know a lot of companies they do have different tools and different methods to do this, but this is for like the default. You get Unreal, you get Maya. How to go around on doing this? So it's gonna and it's everything hand key. Everything hand key stylized animation. What is the process of animating hand key? Because a lot of people think like, oh, animating with games, I'm only gonna clean up motion capture. It's not like that. Like we saw, like, and the lectures are being a progression. Like we talk about video reference on the first one, and then face appeal, and now game. So if you watch the first one and then this one, it connects together. So what we're gonna go over today is playing well. Yes, understanding the assignment, every time we're working with game animation, things can get a little bit more confusing than feature film because feature film has a little more like structural, where you have like a lead, a supervisor, a storyboard, a kickoff from the director. So the directions are very clear. Like, oh, do this, this, and this. With game, sometimes just like, hey, I need this to playtest my game, and then you need to figure out like this. Sometimes they say like, hey, I need this character to attack, and you need to figure out everything. Like, okay, who is this character? What are the weapons? Is like a range character, a melee character, and what do I need to do? And a lot of that stuff you need to figure out yourself, and doesn't come from like a storyboard or anything. Even like the attacks, like, is the sword heavy? Is the sword light? You need to, of course, get from like concept, talk to our director, etc. But you need to understand better what you need to do. And then my process, I record reference. I like recording reference before starting. I think about what it is, create a board of reference, and then I record my own reference when I can. When I can't, because the action is like a little bit too complicated and stuff, I tend to get some reference online. And then for whoever's familiar with animation, we go through like blocking, spline, polish, and the next step after this, usually the in-game implementation. That's the difference between like feature film and game as well. And I like bringing up this difference because I worked on both, and I know a lot of you guys are either studying for like just games or just feature film, or still exploring like animation, don't know where to go. So it'd be good to know a little bit of like, oh, those are the difference, those are the similarities, and some stuff are like the same, but some stuff are different. So the in-game implementation is pretty important for a game animator, just to understand. Usually, when you work on the industry on bigger studios, there is a gameplay team that implements for you. You only take care of animating, but the more you know how that process works, better it will be for you to design something that will be better implemented. So the designer is not going to be like, oh no, this doesn't work. I don't know why, or it's like it's a frustration. No, you know how it works. Like, oh yeah, this is going to look great in game, and you just take care of the Maya file, and then the game designer is going to implement. So our assignment today is going to be a heavy attack. A Story Adventures is the name of the game. I created this game during my class. I mean, created the game. We're still developing together the game with the students. We have like modules like game fundamentals. So the game is a 3D side scroller. So I'm just like giving some context so for what we're gonna animate. So the 3D side scroller takes place in old Greek Roman mythology. So we can get like a better idea of like who the character is, what the setting the character is on. Our main character is Astoria, strong hero character that uses her sword and magic to defeat enemies. So we know we have like the sword. It's a big, heavy sword, and she also has magical powers that we can play with that. So we can like think about this like if the character is just has the sword, like okay, the character is gonna be very precise with the sword. It's been using this for years. The character just got the sword is gonna be a little bit more clumsy with the sword, like beginner with the sword. It has also powers. It's gonna do less effort with the sword, more effort with the power. It's gonna balance it out. And then our assignment today is gonna be to create a heavy attack that would seem, this word is very hard for me to pronounce, but it's gonna blend into idle and locomotion states seamlessly. It's such a hard word. I don't know why I put it, but it sounds nice. So we just need to, because a lot of people, I see a lot of Unreal tutorials online, and I'm new to Unreal. I work at Riot Games. And for those who like didn't meet me before, I didn't introduce myself because I see a lot of familiar faces. I work as a senior animator at Riot Games, work on League of Legends, and I also teach on Animation Flow. So at Riot Games, we have our engine called Riot Engine on League of Legends. So I'm not as familiar with Unreal as people who work on the industry with Unreal. So I had to learn on my own time because I was curious, like, oh, I want to learn more about game design. And I saw a lot of video tutorials. I saw like a lot of YouTube videos everywhere. I look it up. I didn't take any class because I wanted to just explore myself on my own time. And most of the classes don't focus on animation. They're like, yeah, you can do this, this, and this. That's how you hook up animation. I was like, okay, cool, but it looks bad. How do I put something between? How do I make this blend nicely? Because at Riot, we really care about how things are flowing and how the game looks nice. And I didn't find anything like that. And it was a struggle for me to like figure out. I didn't figure out by myself. I asked some friends. Skylar is a principal animator at Riot Games. He has a great series of tutorials from Agora. It's a little bit outdated because Unreal 4 and a lot of that stuff is easier to do now. But I bother him a lot, and he helped me a lot. Like he's a fantastic animator and gameplay animator. So he really helped me. And with the knowledge I was getting from him, I was also adapting myself. Like, oh, I understand this. Now I'm gonna try like this. I'm gonna try like this. And a lot of the stuff I try to come up. Sometimes I just looking up help tutorials from Unreal, sometimes asking ChatGPT like, "Hey, I have this problem in Unreal. Can you help me?" And then ChatGPT is gonna like tell me, "Oh, try this, this, and this." So I'm trying to get information like everywhere. And so the result for today should be a new attack animation implemented inside Unreal. So these are reference boards. First thing, like we have the character, like we saw the idle of the character here. These are idle pose, and this is the idle animation. So the character is still like a strong character, holding the sword with one hand, and but the sword is heavy. So I go to my reference board. I try to get things that are similar, of like the same vibe and same style, trying to sell the weight of the sword, nice line of action, etc. But always keep in mind the player and how the animation is gonna feel in game. Because if you make something that it takes too long for the character to anticipate, like oh the sword is very heavy, or I'm gonna make like this, like it's grabbing the sword and swing, it's gonna be frustrating to play. So always try to design and keep in mind how the player is gonna feel when he click the button. The way it responds is what is gonna make like a successful gameplay animation compared to feature film where like it's all about the little details and the performance and feeling like realistic, engaging, not realistic, like engaging, even if it's cartoony. And in gameplays, what is more important is the game. Sometimes the animation will be broken, but if it feels nice in game, the game is gonna be really nice. So let's just dive in on this assignment now. First, I have my video reference. This is the reference room riots. And like you see here, we have like those props. I got this prop swords, and I'm just trying to get like nice personality on the character. I don't know why the video is lagging so much. Yeah, so I try to get like nice personality on the character. Try to input some of like, for example, this decision here, switching the hand. It was like something that I planned to do it. So I also planned in my eyes, like I think it would be cool if she's swinging with both hands. She lands with like reverse hand and then switches as she's turning. Brandon was there recording with me, and he's present here on the back. Also, Riot animator, and I always like recording with someone like you guys saw in the recording like video reference talk. I was recording with Ben, with Brandon. I always ask someone like, hey, let's record some reference, because always like good to brainstorm and get some others opinion. So after I have this reference, I go to my first blocking. So the first blocking is where I put my reference in Maya. I personally like putting the reference. A lot of people like using image plane. Sometimes I use image plane. Sometimes I like putting just on a regular plane on the back of Maya because I keep moving the plane around. And image plane is a little bit harder because you need to move the values. But I like the image plane that I have a shortcut to toggle. Alt 4 is the default shortcut from Maya. So I can just toggle the reference on and off. So it's not like it's just a preference. It depends on the shot. This one, I just put like a plane there on the background, and you see like the reference is playing, and I'm trying to get the main poses from this reference, just enough poses for me to understand every motion. So that's what I consider blocking. It's kind of like a storyboard pass, a comic book. So I just go, I'm not worried too much about breakdowns. I'm just worried about what is gonna sell this idea, what is important. It's important, the anticipation, and then after the anticipation, the extreme before the hits, and then the hit frame somewhere here, and then the wind up after the hit frame, kind of like overlap following through, and then reversing, going back to idle. I always start on my idle pose and end on my idle pose because that's just like my base attack. So I start from that pose and I end on that pose on my file. So I keep those poses in mind, and then I animate everything in between. But this is just like put a star on this note because we're gonna change it up a little bit later on. And then on my retime blocking pass, I get the same poses that I have. I didn't add any extra pose here. I just get those same poses and try to retime thinking about the gameplay. So I decided, because I've been designing this game myself, I tested a little bit. So I decided like, okay, heavy attack, the hit frame is gonna be about frame 14 or 16. So I look it up online. I didn't come up with these numbers myself. I look it up. I got some game recordings. I frame it through. I'm animating 30 FPS. because it's for gameplay, not animating 60. The engine converts to 60. And I was thinking like, okay, frame 14 to 16, it's a good range for a heavy attack because it gives some time for the player what is considered a heavy attack. So heavy attack is gonna take more damage from the enemy, but in exchange of you being locked for some more time. A light attack is usually instant, but it takes less damage. So for you to use a heavy attack, you need to think like, for example, if you have an enemy that is attacking and you use a heavy attack, while you're like about to go to attack, you're gonna get attacked by the enemy. Or if something like an enemy like really fast, like keep dodging around. If you use a heavy attack, you're gonna miss, and the enemy is gonna like attack you. So this is just like thinking about the game dynamics. That's why we need to put like some time, like 15 frames is half a second. So I think like if half a second feels like enough of like the player have to let go half a second to actually hit, I don't know, like 50% of the health of an enemy. And a light attack is gonna be 10%, but it's instant. So you can just keep hitting the enemy. And after this retime pass, that's how I decided how fast this beginning is gonna be. And if we look at my reference, it was super slow. It was like if I do this in game, no one's gonna play this game. You're just gonna click, and then the character is locked there. It's like, okay, fine, I don't wanna play anymore because it just gets frustrating. And this is my final blocking pass. So this is usually what I show to anyone that is like game designer, animation supervisor, game director, anyone that needs to know about this attack. So I just have this blocking where I actually understand what's happening. So I don't show anything previous than this. This is the first time that I'm gonna interact back. I got my assignment, do a heavy attack for Astoria. I go back, reference, record reference, final reference board, blocking, retime blocking, final blocking, and then on this final blocking, I show to the director, for example, or the game designer, like, hey, you can put that in game. Let's try it out if that's the idea. I put some viewport VFX just to sell the idea better, just because game designers, some of them are not artists, they're more technical. So as much as you give them to understand the idea, it's gonna help. So it's just like, yeah, just remember that here is where she's gonna be attacking. So it's gonna be a fast motion. There's this mirror frame here. And then this blocking is understandable. You can understand what's happening on this blocking when you watch it. So this is my point where like, okay, I'm gonna share this with the game designer. And it's approved. Game designer tested out like, okay, cool. That's the idea we're gonna go for. Let's just keep going. I start on the spline. This is my first spline pass. So spline when I start like making the movement smoother. So I track arcs. I start just making like I start usually just getting a little bit more granular about the workflow. I start with the COG to get the weights, and then I go up to the body, and with that I fix some poses on the arms, and then I do the legs usually last. So I like doing upper body first, as long as I feel like the legs are not being too far from where it should be. So I do like usually upper body first, and then I move the legs a little bit if they're too far. If they're like where they should be, I do the legs last. But again, it depends on the shot. Some shots I do the COG and legs first, and then I do the body after. But I always kind of split my workflow, my eye, where I'm focusing on COG going up or COG going down. So this is my first blind pass, and this is where I start also getting those like, oh, I kind of don't like how she's jumping a little bit forward. She was sliding on my blocking, and then I put this jump. So I just start like polishing more and taking care of more details. This sword is like popping out around here. So you see how like the sword is going all over. I didn't take care of like those small details because I want to get the overall feeling. And this is the final version in Maya. For presentation purpose, I usually do this for presentation purpose. I put like a box in there just to show what should be like the enemy, like where the character is gonna hit. I put the grids on the floor just to show how much the character is translating forward. So how much movement this character should have. Is it lagging there as well? No. Yeah. How much the character is translating forward, and everything is a little bit more polished. and the character goes back to the idle pose. So this, I finish it up in Maya. This is what I have. Now I need to put this in game. So this is my final version. Okay, let's call this final Maya. Now, this is half of my work in gameplay animation. The other half is gonna be what we're gonna see from here forward. That is less animation and more technical in a way. It's still animation, but more technical in gameplay. So this is how it works implemented in game. So this is the version implemented in game. But before going to the conclusion, let's jump into Maya. And I want to show you guys how the Maya file works and the progression of this Maya file. So if we go here, I'm going to open my polished version. Let's open this one. And how I organize, it's very important for your Maya file to be organized. Let me see which version is this one. So, go. Yeah. So this is my polished version. This has a spoiler already because I don't think I have a previous version than that that has the animation polished. But basically what's happening is the character is translating forward. Usually we have a controller here that is on the base of the character, and that is called the root motion controller. If you move this controller, it doesn't move anything on the character. But this you can activate to move the character in engine. Is root motion in engine. So what I'm doing here, I'm moving this controller as much as the character is moving forward. So that is gonna translate in game. So the character is gonna be locked. That means that the player is playing. You click this button, the player cannot move anywhere. The the player is locked on that position, and we're controlling this position with this controller in Maya. So that's what we need to understand. So I'm animating this controller going forwards. It doesn't have anything to do with this. This moves your character around. This is the root of the character. This doesn't move anything around in Maya. It's just moving the character in engine. So I don't need to have this under the character. I need to have this. So I can just animate normally up to this point. And then I get to this point. I was like, okay, I'm going to animate this. And then I need to identify what is my attack and what is my blend back to idle. Because whenever you finish attacking, if you don't put any blending there, I'm gonna show some examples in real. The character is just gonna is gonna look like those old games where you attack and the character just snaps to the idle pose. Attack, it snaps to the idle pose. So I designed here, if we go back here on the final version, the characters returning to idle. So you see like the characters finish the attack and is turning and assuming back the position. And that's where you can input a lot of personality on your characters because this can be canceled by the player. If the player starts moving, you're not gonna return to idle. You're gonna start moving. But if the player attacked and like just stay there, you can just do something cool. So that's where we like in League of Legends. If you notice, there's a lot of really cool blends to idle because that's where we spend the personality of the character. Hui, for example, he attacks something. There's like a long wind up, and then like he spins the brush and come back. Or like attack on the ult, for example, the ult was the one that I animated. Ult and like some other ones. So he attacks, and then he's like on the floor. And if you stay in idle, he's gonna like fix his hair, do this, and go back to his idle pose. Most of the players don't see that because you start moving. And we also have the blend to the locomotion. So we need to think about, okay, this first part here is our attack. So this first part here is our attack. And from here, from frame 45, I'm gonna blend back to idle. But what happens if I just say like on, I can open the previous file, but basically what happens if I just continue the animation like I have on the play blast and the blended to idle is happening here? It's not gonna work in game because the character is far away from the roots. So your character is like over here, but when you're exporting to engine, everything goes to where the player is playing. So your character is just gonna be far away and then translate it back, and that's gonna cause some problems. So that's why this is my version after, like this is polish prepare for Unreal. Let me open the previous one real quick. Uh, because I don't animate like with this split. So basically, after I polish it up, mm, so yeah, here is one of my polished versions or blocking plus, I believe. Yeah, it's the textures loading. Come on. Yeah, it's here. Cool. So this is my blocking version. But you see how I'm animating? It's pretty straightforward how the character is attacking and coming back to idle. So I make the character come back to idle over here. I just want to worry about the flow of the animation. I want everything to flow nicely. Once I have this polished and this done, I go to that version that I just showed that I'm going to reopen where I bring it back to idle. And I'm gonna open my final version in Unreal, in Maya, so you guys see like what was exported. And I like using those bookmarks. You have like the Maya default bookmark, and Animbot also has a bookmark button here. Maya's bookmark is down here, yeah, like right here, and you can create those bookmarks. And here's where I start organizing my file. And there's like, okay, this is my attack portion of the animation up to frame 45. Frame 46 is my blend back to idle. So I translate the character back to the zero and I just match with the idle. And if we look the final pose and the first pose, they should match perfectly. It's not matching perfectly, it's a mistake here, but they should match perfectly because you're just blending back to that pose. Cool. So that is like what is important in game. In terms of exporting to Unreal, it depends on where you work. You have like exporter tools. If you're just doing like personal work on your own, you need to export the deformation system that is like the root, like all the bones, all the joints. That's what you're gonna export. And if you wanna just like know how to bring the character, there's a video, it's like 2 minutes long. It's on my YouTube, or you can just find on YouTube. It's super easy. You just export the character, import there, and you're gonna have the skeleton and the mesh, and then you bring in the animation. So I select my hierarchy, and I use game exporter, file, game exporter, and on the animation clips tab, I just make sure it's exporting selection. And here I organize, for example, attack heavy from frame 1 to 45, heavy to idle 46 to 72. And this is also where I start working on like how to export for locomotion, how to work for locomotion. So I have my blend back to idle. And that's like an interesting thing about the workflow because I like focusing on the attack. And then I always blend back to idle because the natural state of the character that shows a lot of personality. Once I get that approved, I worry about blending back to locomotion. So I have this animation here done. I was like, cool, I like this. Now let's worry about how to bring this to run. So I know my attack is gonna end on frame 45. So I copy this frame. Sometimes I copy the whole animation over to the timeline. As you see here, I just copy this frame and then I paste on my run cycle. And from here, I make a blend to run. This one is a pretty straightforward blend. There's nothing special, but here's where I start making something more special. So that I'm just like make the character turn. Maybe he's gonna turn here. She's gonna turn here. Swipe the sword or something. That's when you can also add a lot of personality on top of your locomotion, which is also what makes the animation cool and a lot more fidelity. And that's what I don't see in any tutorials online on YouTube because you just see like, okay, that's how you move the character, and everything just like slowly blend in using the Unreal Blend. And that's how you also work on combo animations. For example, on this file, I also have another one that is the attack 2. So attack 2 is going to start from some point on attack 1, which I decided here that is going to be on this pose. And I designed this attack thinking about like a 2 combo attack. So from this pose, I'm going to start on this pose. and that's gonna be my second attack, where she's just swinging up and blending back to idle. And this blend was done yesterday, so sorry for being so rough. I didn't have it ready yet, so I was just like, I'm gonna put something together to show. And you see how I have another attack. Again, same thing, using root motion, where the root is going with the character, and then going back to 0. So this pose here matches with this pose. This pose here matches with this pose. It's not matching perfectly. I did yesterday rushing a little bit, was too late. But you will see how this works back in Unreal. Cool. So I have all those pieces. So that's the main difference. Like feature film animator. So if you're thinking about game, think that the job that you're doing feature film is gonna be like 50, 60% of your work. That you're figuring out the animation, you're making like all the sharpness, and then you're gonna start thinking about all these technicalities. And everything is a little bit different. Like this attack is specifically this solution. All their attacks, other combos, other types of like spells or whatever is gonna need other solutions. So you need to be a lot more problem solving than actually just polishing up the animation. And so this is my final Maya file. My Maya file is usually like this, a little bit messy. The character is doing a lot of stuff around. For example, for the attack 2, what I did was I copied the whole attack 1 just to get a nice flow from attack 1 to 2. So I know exactly which frame I want to blend out. And then from here, I just start this nice swipe. And then I have those guides. So like, okay, I need to export. I know I'm going to export this bookmark. If I right click here, I can just frame my bookmark and then I just polish this. I know that those are the only frames that will be exported for this specific attack. And then the same for this one and etc. So I just have like those small pieces to polish it up. This is not 100% final polish, but it is a good state where you can go to gameplay, like game tests, gameplay, and then it's all approved. I just go into like the very minor details, how the walk here. I didn't even worry too much about like the hand switching, IKFK and constraints. I was just like, I just want to make this work, see if it works out in game. Cool. And then this works. Game exporter. Now I have uh, 5 clips on this file. It's missing one clip that is the attack 2 heavy to run. So it's missing one more clip here. So we're gonna have 6 clips on the same file. Some people like splitting the files like 1 clip per file. Some people like keeping on the same timeline. I have timelines at Riot that is like 900 frames long because I do a little bit of everything and I leave a long space. It doesn't really matter because I'm always framing those exact frames, and I always leave everything very well labeled, very well organized. So someone jumps in on my file, they understand like, okay, this is here, this is here, this is here. I understand everything is happening. Careful with that because if you're like space switching or rotate order change, anything like that, it can get complicated if you have like too many animations on the same file and they're like, oh, it's world here, but it's local on the other one. It's IK, then FK, and then there's a constraint, there's another constraint, constraint one. So all those technical things gets into your way of like polishing up. So sometimes I get like, even if it's the same attack, like basic attack 2, if technicality gets in my way, I just split into files like, okay, I'm gonna focus this one, save as, this the other file, and I just make it like cleaner for both attacks. So just yeah, be careful to not complicate yourself. Oh, heavy, it's if we go back here, the heavy attack, maybe you go back a little bit later. So it's when the character is doing an attack that takes a little bit more time for the to happen. So it takes more damage from the enemy, but in the other hand, it takes more time from the player of the character being in place. No worries, no worries. Yeah, sorry if I'm going too fast. Also, let me know. Just randomly like, hey, can I go a little bit slower? Or if you want like, oh, I'm definitely gonna need to rewatch this, the link will be there. Because now we're gonna jump into Unreal. Yeah, of course. Yeah, yeah. Feel free to ask questions as well. That's a great question. Let me just put the project to open because it's gonna take some time. Where is it? No. So basically here, when I'm teleporting back, as whenever I get to this point here, when I'm back here, the root control doesn't matter anymore. I'm not using root motion for this. So basically, the root motion is when I'm attacking, I'm controlling how much the character is going to translate forward. After that animation finished, the character is going to assume the pawn position. It's called a pawn in Unreal. So the character is going to assume the pawn position. And that's always zero in Maya. So everything you do, if I turn off root motion, and I'm going to do it right now, you see that the character is going to stay in place and then just go back to that position. Because we're activating in Unreal to use this controller, only on those 45 frames we're following this. On frame 46, this doesn't matter anymore. You see, like it's even off here because this is not being used because I'm not activated like root motion. So now if we just jump into Unreal, we have this game. So the game design was set up previously, of course, and I have it's not fully functional, it's like it's still in progress, but we have locomotion. The character can move only left to right because 3D side scroller. And then when I click my left mouse click, we have that animation working in game. So I click, if I'm moving forward, let's say I'm moving forward, I click, I cannot move anymore. I need to, and that's the root motion being active. I click several times, I can't keep spamming the same attack because it's a heavy attack. So we need to hold the player. You can't just be heavy attacking the enemy because that's gonna be unfair. It's gonna be not fun to play. So it's holding the character here. And then if during this attack, not even during, if I right click anywhere, I have my second attack. And then you see it blends back to idle. So if I do left click then right click, I have the blend from attack 1 to attack 2. Let me go away from this. Attack 1 and attack 2. If I attack with my left click and I start moving immediately, you see that the character is gonna activate the other blend. It's holding a little bit more because I did some retiming for game testing purpose, but it's activating another animation. So that's like the final output. Let's just go over a little bit of how this was done. And sorry if it gets a little complicated. It's gonna look intimidating at first, and then when you learn about it, it's even more. But but it's not that bad. No, it is pretty bad. So if we go on our animation blueprint, it's just like a lot of logic thinking. So if we go on our animation blueprint, it looks like this, where we have our locomotion system. This is our animation blueprint going back. So this is the output pose of our character. We have a slot where this slot is gonna play anything that is triggered by like an action, like the attacks are being played on these slots. And then we have the locomotion state machine that goes through all the states of what we just watched. So if we see here, we have an idle, and every tutorial you get, you have the idle to walk and back to idle. But like, what about when you start walking or when you stop walking, as we just saw on the game here? We start walking, she swings the sword a little bit. We stop walking, she gets the momentum and stop. So that's where we have those clips here and how idle we start walking. That means that the horizontal speed of the character is going to increase. It's going to play this animation until this animation is done. We're going to play the walk cycle. And the same with the stop. The horizontal speed is stopped is less than a certain value. It's gonna play this animation and then it's gonna connect back to idle. So very simple, very straightforward, makes sense. If you're in the middle of like I just start moving, but then I stopped, you also need to connect this animation because you're playing this animation. So if you just stopped, you're gonna connect this back to the walk to idle. If I kept moving, Like I just like I'm still stopping. I keep moving, and I'm gonna break some of these connections so you guys see the difference of if we didn't have these blends, for example. Now, if I start moving and I stop and I start moving again, the character doesn't move. And the same if I just start moving and then I stop, the character doesn't move. So that's where a lot of this is figured out by game design, but you understanding this helps you design better animations for this interaction. For our attacks, the attack is done by uh, a trigger event. So that is definitely done by game design. So you don't need to worry too much about this unless you're doing a personal project and you wanna just like click on the blueprints. But it's pretty straightforward. I didn't like the if I did it, you guys can do it. I have like no experience in Unreal. Started learning Unreal was like February this year, and I just like figure out a lot of stuff. The simplest way to showcase animation, nothing's functional. The attack doesn't take damage or anything like that because I want to just make sure the animation is playing nicely. Because whenever I'm working with a game designer, I was like, hey, this I think what I we can do, and that's gonna make it work. If you want to do an indie game, then I recommend you taking a game design class or something more on the game design side. If you just want to focus on gameplay animation, then it's important to know just like a fraction of it. This is like a very simplified way of you press a button where like you press a button, enhance input action, that you just say like, okay, press a button, call heavy attack. You turn on a variable, is heavy attacking. You play an animation. So I choose the animation here, a montage, and then this is the second one. Wait, these ones are a little more complicated, but anyway, I play the animation. The animation is complete. I don't let the character retrigger. So if you keep clicking, you need to only do that after 1 second, and then I set the variable back to off. So pretty straightforward. I click a button, it plays this animation, sets the variable on, like, okay, it's attacking, play this, completed, you cannot play it again, and then turn off, so now you can play it again. Pretty straightforward, but that's where up to here you can find pretty easily on YouTube. After this is where I just like, I almost died for months to try to figure out because everyone does a different way, and most of the studio they have custom tools to do that. How do I go back from? And I was just like, how do I go back from this attack back to idle? Like, how do I do that? I even call like a game designer who has like a patron. I was just like, oh, I'm gonna make a call with him. I was like, oh, this is a great question. I never had to do that. And I was like, for me, it was like so basic because I'm so focused in animation. And they're just like, oh yeah, it's a great question. I don't know how to do that. And Skylar helped me a lot. So basically, what we need to do is notify our animation. So when we go back here to our animation, we're using an animation montage, and we just notify the animation that we can go somewhere. So from this frame to this frame, we can activate a variable. So basically, we create, and that's where it started getting a little bit complicated. I'm gonna say like high level stuff. We create a new notify event. On this notify event, you just get the animation, set a variable to on and off. When the event begins, variable is on. When the event ends, variable is off. So we bring this event into our animation on those specific frames. So we go back to the montage and we have the blend out here. So on this frame, the variable is on. On this frame, variable is off because it's the end. We don't need this, so it's cleaner. And this is my attack animation. With this variable on, now we can go back to our animation system and say like, hey, I have this variable here. So I get everything. So I get a state alias, which I get every animation that I check in here. So I don't need to do like one connection from everyone to this. So this basically a shortcut to do all of these connections to this animation. And I just activate like, is this variable on? Enter this transition. Sounds very simple. It was complicated to get to the result, but it makes total sense. So you go in animation and you say, okay, you're ending this animation. You have the attack from frame 40 to 45, which is around here. You activate the variable. And then if the variable is active, you play this animation. You finish playing this animation, you go back to idle or you go back to locomotion. Very straightforward. And then the way you will set up the transition is if the animation is ending plus the speed is lower, go to idle. If the speed is higher, go to locomotion states. Who is following here? Because I bet I'm not following myself. So who is not lying here? it's it's the slots. So the event is triggered on the other blueprint when you press the button. So when we go here, so that's why it's complicated. Like why Unreal didn't make so simple. Our engine at Riot, it is a very old engine, I agree, but things are much more simplified for us because we implement everything on League of Legends, and everything is much more simplified on the animation station sides. And then the game designer do their thing, and we can just like, okay, this is gonna go to here, this is gonna go to here. On Unreal, you have to go around a little bit more. Yeah. Yep. Yeah, that is a great question. You have to consider everything, but you cannot overdo because then the game is gonna get too heavy. We have a memory budget on League of Legends, so we can't have like too many animations because not gonna run on certain computers. So, for example, one thing that I could have done here is using on the second attack. This is the blend, but when we jump, we also have the jump landing. I could reuse the same animation to save on assets. So you reuse the same clip. So you need to be strategic, and that's like also a good gameplay design, like a good gameplay animator. He knows where to he use how to design something that is gonna be easier to blend with like different locomotion states. For example, on this attack, what I could do, the return to idle is like this, the return to locomotion could be a small jump that can link into the walk and the run. So you have this jump and then like, oh, this goes to walk, this goes to run. And I just have one asset instead of having to animate like walk and run. So that's like, that goes with the planning phase. Whenever I get like a task, I'm like, okay, this, for example, I can give like example from League of Legends. I have a character and the character is pointing this way for the attack. Who is pointing the brush this way for the attack? If it's pointing this way and you're walking that way, we can make a parametric where you're pointing this way, you're gonna walk that way. You have a clip where the arm is still dragging this way. So if you walk that way, the arm is dragging this way. So you're gonna have a clip for every angle that you go. So you're gonna have like 6 clips. But if you don't have the arm like this and you have like a swipe, you can have just one clip that would work nicely for every angle. So you save on 6 clips. Of course, it all depends on what the attack is. And if you break down, I think there's a website that breaks down League of Legends, and you can see every animation for the character. I think it's called Timo, even the website, Timo, or something like that. And then you see how like the animators, they were like very smart on like save on assets and putting only where is important. So this is a good example here, which I will probably do is making sure I don't need a blend to walk and to run. Like the same blend goes to walk, like it works for the walk and works for the run. And that's how you plan your animation. If it's something that it really feels like she's anticipating a lot for the run, if you do it all of that and go to walk, it's not gonna connect. Or if it's something very relaxed that just goes to walk, something like what we just did, is not gonna connect if it goes to run. If you do something that is in between and you use some of the blend time, which I'm gonna talk about right now, you can get something that will both work on like both clips. It work on both clips. So that is where like a lot of gameplay animation is also different from feature film. You have to think about a lot of other things that when you're just like I'm just animating. I tell everyone like I'm animating like 2.5, 3 days out of the week. The rest is thinking about how to implement, how to optimize, how to make sure things are connecting well, putting things in engine, trying to find new solutions, because that's what makes the game more interesting. Not just if everything is like super polished, and we have a great example of the game Kenna and the Spirit Worlds, amazing animation. It comes from like some feature film people, but the gameplay wasn't so good for when people played. There are a lot of complaints about the gameplay. So I still think it was fun. I thought it was fun, but I can understand how it's not so responsive. It doesn't think too much about the player and the game design, but thought a lot about the arts and the animation. So this is like where my brain had to shift a lot when I came from like DreamWorks and I jump into Riot League of Legends. There's a very gamer game. Like people who plays League of Legends, like they really play it. So yeah, it's like if people like get very serious about like every single detail. So for me, it was like a very big shift in my brain. Like, okay, yeah, it's not important if the finger is overlapping the right way. It's important it feels nice when you click. I would say for the first 10 years, which I'm not there yet. No, I think it took me like about 3, 4 months to get my head around, and about a year to get used to the engine, and then now I'm like trying to improve the engine. So I got so much into it. Then now I'm like the responsible for advancements into our tech system, like the engine and stuff like that. So I propose new tools and things that will make it better. That's why I got like some experience in Unreal. Like, okay, how do they do it? How can we do? How can we make it better? So I start like designing new tools, and the engineering department will develop them, of course. But and then I got like really into games. So I just got like, okay, games like in it's super fun, but it's a different mindset. Cool. So another thing I want to talk about is about the blend between animations. So it depends on, and that's how. Okay, I'm gonna show something interesting. If we disconnect this idle to walk, and that's what you're gonna see on the tutorials out there. It's usually gonna be idle going straight to walk with. Let me just let me just save time. So horizontal speed, cool. Idle going straight to walk. This is what you're gonna see on most of the YouTube videos when you like, oh, I want to learn a real how to implement. You're gonna see this. So it's gonna work. You're gonna be like, oh wow, I can make like a decent game animation. But oh no, did I compile? And turn this off too. All right. So now yes. So it works, right? So we're moving here. The character is moving forward. But if you get into the AAA game and what the industry really cares, the foot is kind of sliding there when we start walking, and the walk just starts playing. And the one way to solve that, sometimes it works, but one way to solve is tweaking the blend time. So if you work on this transition, you see like the engine is blending one animation to the other in zero point 0.2 seconds. This is always a second. So if I put here, for example, 1 second, it's gonna slowly blend one animation to the other. So you see now like how the characters idle and then slowly start moving the legs. If I put this as 0, it's just gonna suddenly pop from one animation and then just start walking. I have one animation, just start walking. You can see that there's a immediate pop. So this can help you a lot. Now going back to the version we had, this can help us a lot by tweaking this value, and that's what I do a lot on my animation there. Because you see, blending back to idle, you see how smooth it is. Like the character stop, you barely see when this animation is playing, and I can oops. We can see what is being active here on the debug, and you see this animation. Let me just put the screen. It's always good to have two screens whenever you're working with this because you can have your graph in one side and the screen on the other side. But now we can see what is being played. You see where it's active. And if we look here on the screen, put more, even more to the sides, you see how idle to walk is being active, and we don't even see when it's blending back to like from walk back to idle or idle to walk into walk, because the animation is all matching in Maya. The frames are matching perfectly, and also the blend time has a little bit of 0.05 blend. Because the frames are matching so perfectly in Maya, I don't need any of the blends of the engine. But from here, from walk back to idle, same thing. So basically, on my file, whenever I have the walk, I put the idle pose in there. What I like doing, and that's like a more like a workflow tip. So I have my idle loop, I have my walk. I'm making the blend walk to idle. So I put my walk animation here on the timeline. I put my idle, my full idle animation here on the timeline. I work on this blend, and then I just get like the second half of this idle, and I blend to the middle of the idle. So I get like I make that my blend. The character starts on the idle and then it just repeats as if it was just playing the idle. So I use half of my original idle into my blend, and my blend is usually a little bit longer. So that is where you can really not see the connection here. And some of the stuff I like just leaving a zero. For example, when she lands, there's no blend. She just goes straight with the hand on the floor. So that's the jump going back to idle. And if the jump goes back, and that's where you can also have fun. If the jump goes back to walk, you can make like a nice anticipation. Jump goes back to run, you can make like a roll or a somersault. So you can give a lot of really nice personality to your character. And that's what really stands out on gameplay animations, like gameplay animation and gameplay animators real, is really bringing those small details there. Cool. I think that's it. I put also here like a heat frame is also pretty interesting, and the death where character just dies, you don't move anymore, and the game resets. Let's go back to our presentation now. Conclusion. It was too hard for too early, too much, but it was recorded. So, uh, and the AI discussion. So conclusion. What we need to do, understand the game you're working on and the needs of this game, because League of Legends is a top-down camera. So everything that moves up, I usually exaggerate because the camera compensates how much the character moves up. A side scroller, I'm gonna focus more on the silhouette on the poses because I don't have the camera going around. A third person, you see from the back, you focus on how the character looks on that camera. The game is supposed to be more cozy, more violent, focus on those references when you're designing it. And that comes into immerse yourself in reference and if possible record your own. I like whenever I start a new character or a new project, I just go deep into like, okay, reference, I study about like Greek mythology, for example, like, oh, this will be cool to put in. So I really get very immersed on that theme so I can get like a nice result back. This is a general animation itself. Always pay attention on timing and weights. I just included here because time is super important for gameplay because of the hit frame and how that feels for the player. And the weight, you still need to make sure you can sell the weight even if the attack is half a second. The sword is really heavy. The attack is half a second. How you're gonna sell this weight? It's just gonna look light because it's too fast. And try to do that on like the wind up and the posing and how you can exaggerate this feeling of weight with less time. And then keep in mind implementation. Of course, what we just did. If you work in the industry, most likely you're not going to have to worry about all of this. Either it's going to depend on the studio. If you start on a startup studio, you're going to start getting into like these details. But if you work at, for example, we're talking to Ben on Friday. He works at Sony Santa Monica. He worked on Ragnarok. He didn't touch anything in Unreal. He would submit the clip, tell the designer. The designer would send like recording from the game. I'll say like, hey, yeah, latest your game is gonna have the most updated animation. So you barely touch it. You can open to browse around, but you don't even have permission to touch. And they have a lot of tools. There are a lot of tools designed for Unreal. At Riot in R&D, I know they have like some really amazing tools. That's why a lot of people they know how to use Unreal with the tools from the studio. But so just keep in mind implementation, you don't need to be an expert. There's a position on most of the studios that's called the tech animator. And that is the responsible to like make sure animation and game design gets together. So that is gonna be a full role. Someone's gonna be studying and doing all of this that we just saw on the blueprinting. So that is not necessarily an animator. If you're interested in that and you like I like game design, I like animation, you can pursue this career, but it's gonna be a lot of studying both sides, both animation and game design. Yeah. No. Yeah, yeah. When I joined Riot, I had no game experience. I only had my feature film demo reel. It helps because they will see that you understand how the game works and the systems work, but they don't require you like, oh, show me the blueprinting. Show me. No. If you're an animator, they're gonna see the animation. Ben, when he joined Riot, I saw his reel, and it was only everything play blast from Maya, because we know like he's a game animator. He understands how it has to be animated for a game. And make sure to name and organize your file properly, because like you guys saw, the characters jumping around in different places and things are happening here and there, like attack one, attack two. I like bookmarking everything, like the right frames and everything, like perfect for my file. So someone jumps in, they're like, okay, this is attack one, this is the blend, this is attack two, this is the blend, there's the blend to walk, this is the blend to idle. Everything is named. I use animbot bookmarks as well. Everything has the name on the timeline, or just the Maya bookmarks. You also can have like the list with all the names. And a little bit of AI discussion. A lot of people are concerned about AI taking over this, especially in game animation, because you can just do a lot of stuff. Like AI is promising us a lot of stuff. I don't think AI will, in the near future, replace animators. I cannot speak about like 5, 10 years from now, but what I've seen, and it's funny because I say that, but I remember I was at Sony ImageWorks, how many years ago? Like 6 years ago, and I animate literally the same way using the same tool. That Animbot was released on that year because it was on when Alan had A tools and then he put Animbot, and that's what I still use. 6 years I work in like several big studios and a lot of technology improvements, but on my workflow day to day, I haven't used any of it. I know that like for motion capture cleanup, it's probably gonna get into that space. I know motion capture record, especially in games, it's gonna get into this space. But for my workflow, I still ask for new tools that are not even AI driven. It's just like basically like, hey, make me a nice space switch or IKFK change or something like that that we still don't have. So me personally, I don't think it's a immediate concern like, oh no, I'm not going to be an animator because AI is going to take over. I think AI is going to help. And that's my second question, like how would AI improve this workflow? And that's what I was talking with Ben. I really want AI to just improve my workflow in a way that I can focus more on the fun parts and less on the little details. For example, having to bring the character back to zero to blend it, I could have an easier way because I need to like match exactly the foot position, and then the main everything has to be back to zero. I have to like space world check, put locators on places. It's like such a technical waste of time that I could just like, okay, this is gonna be on zero, this is gonna be root motion. And I believe there are tools that do that. It doesn't even need to be AI, but I think that's a space where developers will be beneficial for us to have like better tools. The current AI driven tools for game animation, the ones that I know about, I believe Move AI, Wonder Dynamics, and Cascador are some tools that are starting using a little bit of AI. But the main problem of those tools, I know Move AI and Wonder Dynamics, basically you record a video of yourself and they output the joints, how like the joints in Maya. Autodesk recently acquired this company, so we can see more of like this coming into default in Maya, which I think is pretty interesting. It's not gonna replace a motion capture because it's not as precise, But for you to put something together, I think like smaller studios gonna have the opportunity to do nicer things. But I don't use any mocap or anything that is captured, and everything looks too realistic because you're just capturing for the from your reference. And Cascadeur is a software that it kind of helps you pose based on like anatomy and like everything looks too similar to everything. So it looks a little bit like a cleaner mocap because it has so many limitations of the muscle and stuff. So it just everything looks too much the same. And we just saw here is like very stylized. So something like this, I haven't seen any tool yet, but maybe there's something out there. If you guys know about something out there, also let me know. I would love to try. But I've been looking around and been trying. I haven't seen anything like that that would help on my workflow. There are like some promises that you like, oh, I want this style, and then just like do it for you. But I don't think it's gonna get nearly as close as an artist actually making it. And the hope is just like it helps on our workflow and it just makes it easier for us to be more creative. Same way I like make an example like when the calculator just got invented, people are doing like all those things. There's still people doing math and there's still like really hard math issues to solve. I can solve some equations and I have a calculator on my phone. It doesn't replace someone that studies that. But I can know like if I need to multiply something, I don't need to get a paper and like type and I just go on the calculator and do this much faster. So I believe that is gonna be like the future in like a much more simplified way, of course. And that's it. Thank you.